When our father died, I expected grief, confusion, maybe even tension, but not betrayal. The will reading was supposed to be a moment of closure, a final acknowledgement of what we meant to our father. Instead, it was the moment my older brother, Matthew, looked me in the eye and reduced my entire existence to a single phrase: "You're just being dramatic." He dismissed my questions, my pain, and worst of all, the truth. Because what Matthew didn't expect was that I would dig. I would fight. And I would uncover a carefully orchestrated plan to erase me from the family legacy entirely. What began as a simple question, why was my name left out, spiraled into a web of secrets, forged signatures, and lies so deep that even I began to question my own memories. But I remember who I was to our father. And I won't let his memory be rewritten. Remember the mahogany table more than the faces. It stretched longer than it needed to, polished to a smug shine, as if it knew it was about to witness something cruel. The lawyer, some gray-haired man who smelled like old paper and scotch, called out names in alphabetical order. My name wasn't one of them. Matthew sat at the far end, flanked by his wife and his sudden, too friendly accountant. He looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Like this was routine. Like our father's death was just another transaction to get through. I waited. I waited while names I didn't recognize were read, while charities I'd never heard of received generous slices of my father's estate. Then came Matthew's name, and with it, nearly everything: the house, the accounts, the vintage collection, the land upstate. The lawyer paused after the last item. No mention of me. Not even a token bequest. Not even a letter. I didn't say anything right away. I think I forgot how to form words. But when I finally asked, calmly, I swear I was calm, "Is that it?" Matthew barely looked up. He shrugged. "You're just being dramatic," he said, like I'd made a scene at a wedding or overreacted to a bad haircut. Like grief wasn't real unless it was his. But it wasn't about grief. It was about betrayal. It was about how our father used to call me every Sunday, how he came to my art shows even when no one else did, how he used to slip me $20 bills and whisper, "Don't tell your brother, he'll say I'm playing favorites." I looked at the lawyer. Was there another document? Maybe something private? He shook his head. This was the only will submitted. Matthew's wife was scrolling through her phone. The accountant was already packing up. I felt invisible. I stood. My hands were shaking, but I made sure my voice was clear. There's been a mistake. Matthew finally met my eyes. Or maybe Dad realized who actually showed up when it mattered. That hit like a slap. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I walked out of that room, past the portraits of dead men in frames too heavy for their own legacies, and I vowed to find out what really happened because I had been there. I had shown up. And something was wrong. The first clue came 2 days later, in a box of my father's things that the housekeeper insisted I take. She said he had asked for it to be kept aside, for me. Inside was a notebook, worn and filled with lists, notes, memories. And tucked in the back pocket, barely noticeable, was a receipt from a notary office, dated 3 weeks before my father died, and signed, but it wasn't the lawyer who had read the will. And it wasn't the document we had just seen. It was something else, something my brother clearly didn't want me to find, and for the first time in days, I felt something besides grief. I felt anger. And I was just getting started. I stared at the receipt for hours, trying to convince myself it meant nothing. But deep down, I knew better. My father didn't make random visits to notaries 3 weeks before dying, not without a reason. And certainly not without telling me the name. On the receipt wasn't the lawyer who read the will. It was someone I didn't recognize, Elaine C. Marino. I Googled her. A small-time notary who worked out of a cramped office above a dry cleaner in Queens. No website. No listed phone number. Just a few business listings, a handful of Yelp reviews. Nothing that screamed conspirator, but something about it felt off. I took the subway there the next morning. The stairs up smelled like steam and bleach, and the waiting area was little more than 2 folding chairs and a chipped coffee table. She looked up from her desk when I entered, a woman in her late 50s, tired eyes, a cardigan that didn't match her shoes. I didn't pretend. 3 weeks before my father died, he came here. I have the receipt. She blinked, and for a split second, I saw it, the recognition. Then she folded it away, fast. I don't discuss client details. He's dead. I still don't discuss them. I pulled out a photo of him. Do you remember this man? She didn't even look. You should leave. But I wasn't leaving. I sat down, slow and deliberate. Look, I'm not asking for legal details. I'm asking if you saw him. If he was alone. If he seemed like himself. She hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she said softly, he was upset. Shaky. He kept repeating something about fairness. Said people were being pressured. Pressured by who? She didn't answer. Just stood and walked to a file cabinet. If you're trying to contest a will, this won't be enough, she said. But if your father came here, he didn't come to erase you. She handed me a photocopy, a partial will. It was only a draft, but it had my name. In my father's handwriting. A note in the margins, include her share directly. No room for interpretation. I left shaking. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a cover-up back home. I dug into Matthew's timeline. He had been staying at Dad's house for 2 weeks before the death. He claimed it was for care, but my father had been stable until the very end. He died of a sudden cardiac event, according to the death certificate. No autopsy was requested, and the more I looked, the more it unraveled. The new lawyer? Hired a month before the death, by Matthew. The old family lawyer was suddenly on a sabbatical. No forwarding information. No return calls that night. I called Matthew. He didn't answer. I texted, found Dad's draft will. Want to talk? He replied 2 words, let it go. That was it, let it go, like I was clinging to a fantasy. Like I was making drama out of nothing. But this wasn't nothing. This was theft, betrayal, manipulation, all done with a calm smile and a shrug. I went back to the notebook, flipping through every page. Tucked near the middle was a sentence that didn't fit with the others. If I die before changing this, look at the fireplace. I froze. At the house. The fireplace had always been his favorite spot. And he was old school. He never trusted digital backups. He once joked that if he ever went missing, I should check the chimney. I didn't wait until morning. I drove to the house, parked across the street. It looked so peaceful from the outside. But I knew better. I found the fireplace cold, dark, and still scattered with ashes. It took me 20 minutes, but I finally pried loose one of the back bricks. There was a small envelope inside. No dust. Recently placed. Inside was a single flash drive, labeled in my father's handwriting, if Matthew lies. My hands trembled. Whatever was on that drive, it wasn't meant to be shared, unless something went terribly wrong, and something had. I didn't sleep that night. The flash drive sat on my desk like a loaded gun. I kept pacing, fingers twitching over the keyboard, afraid of what I might find. Afraid of what I wouldn't. But when I finally clicked it open, my father's voice filled the room. It wasn't a letter or a legal statement. It was a video. Just him, sitting in that old leather chair by the fireplace, filmed on his phone, the lighting uneven and his breathing heavy. If you're watching this, he began. Then Matthew did what I feared. I sank into my seat. My stomach dropped. Like I was falling through the floor. I don't have much time, he said, and I can't trust the people around me anymore. Not even the lawyer I've used for decades. Matthew has changed. He's pressured me to rewrite things. Threatened to handle things if I didn't. He paused, wiped his face. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not in size, but in spirit. Like he was already preparing to disappear, I made a new will. I gave it to a notary. Elaine Marino. But I know my son. I know how far he'll go. If he gets to her, if he gets to that document before you do, then this video is the only truth that might survive. I covered my mouth to stop from gasping. He went on, voice raw now. I wanted to split everything evenly. You and Matthew. I wanted fairness. But Matthew said you didn't deserve anything. That you were just a burden. That if I didn't cut you out, he'd walk away forever. A pause, I should have stood stronger. He looked down for a moment, then straight back into the camera. Your mother would have wanted you to be protected. You were always the careful one. The one who saw what I tried to hide. If you're seeing this, don't let him win. The video ended there. No signature. No date. But I didn't need one, I sat frozen. My father had tried to fix it. He'd seen it coming, felt the pressure, and he'd tried to stop it. And Matthew had buried every trace. The next morning, I drove to Elaine's office again. She didn't open the door this time. Just called out through the wood. I told you, I can't help you. I have a video, I said. My father. Saying he feared Matthew would change the will. Saying you had the real one. Silence, then. A click. The door opened. She didn't speak. Just walked to a drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope, and handed it to me. I kept a copy. Against the rules, I know. But he begged me to. Said his son was dangerous. Inside was a notarized will. Dated and signed. 2 witnesses. Everything clean, and there it was, my name. My share. Equal to Matthew's. I had what I needed, or so I thought, because when I tried to file it with probate court, I hit a wall. The clerk frowned, typed something, then looked up at me with a weird mix of sympathy and suspicion. This case is sealed. She said. By court order. No new filings allowed. Sealed. Already, by who? Only one person had that kind of access, Matthew. He had filed something behind my back. Moved faster than I thought. Or maybe planned this longer than I realized. I left the courthouse feeling like I'd stepped into a trap that night. I checked my mailbox. There was a letter.no return address. Inside, a single typed sentence. You're making a mistake. No signature.no. Explanation, but I knew the font. Matthew used the same one on every office memo. He'd once bragged about how clean it looked. This was his warning, and it meant only one thing. He knew I was getting close. I didn't go home after that letter. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly for hours, looping the same blocks, windows down, hoping the night air would clear my head. But it didn't. I kept seeing Matthew's face at the will reading, so calm, so smug, like everything had already been decided. Like I was never even a factor. He had sealed the case. He had buried the will. And now he was threatening me. All while pretending I was the one being dramatic, but someone else had known my father's mind in those final weeks. Someone who had seen everything, Carmen. She had worked for our family for over 20 years. She was more than a housekeeper. She was a witness to our lives. She knew when things shifted, when silence meant tension, when laughter was forced. And when I picked up that notebook from her, she had looked at me with something close to pity. I called her. Can I come over? Her answer was instant. You should have come sooner. Her apartment was small but warm. Familiar smells of clove and fabric softener hit me at the door. She motioned for me to sit before I could even speak. I didn't want to get involved, she said. But I knew something was wrong when he started locking his study. Did he tell you anything? No. She said, but he didn't have to. He stopped eating. He looked scared all the time. One night, I heard yelling, "Your father and Matthew." Something about consequences. About not letting her destroy everything. Destroy what? She looked at me carefully. That's what I don't know. But after that night, your father started writing a lot. Hiding papers. Making calls from the garden. I showed her the copy of the real will. She didn't seem surprised. "He gave me something," she said quietly. "In case anything happened to him. He told me to wait until I was sure you were ready." From her closet, she pulled a shoebox. Inside were photos, old ones of us as kids, my parents, Christmas mornings, but beneath them was what mattered, a series of handwritten letters, addressed to me, and the first, my father wrote about his regret. How he had raised 2 sons so differently. How he let guilt shape his decisions. How Matthew had always wanted more, needed to win, even if it meant stepping over people, but the last letter was the one that broke me. I found out what Matthew did, it read. Not just with the will. With the pills. The pills, he wasn't supposed to die that soon. My hands went cold. I caught him refilling bottles with a different dosage. He said it was a mistake. I didn't believe him. I started hiding the medication. My father believed Matthew had been trying to hasten his death. I don't want to believe my son would do this. But if I don't make it to court, then someone should know. You. It has to be you. I couldn't breathe. I had gone there thinking this was about money. About fairness. But it wasn't. This was darker. I looked at Carmen, who had gone pale. "Do you think he?" "I don't know," she said. "But your father wasn't paranoid. He knew something." I left with the letters, the photos, and a fury I could barely contain. I didn't care about the estate anymore. I didn't care about the house or the land. I wanted justice. I called a lawyer. A real one this time. Told him everything. He listened. Took notes. Asked if I had evidence. "I have a video, a will, and letters." "And do you have the courage to take this public?" he asked. "Because once we file this, it won't stay quiet." I did, but just as I was about to send him everything, I got another message. This one wasn't typed. It was a voicemail, from my father. "I need you to know," he said, voice trembling. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't natural. And it wasn't an accident." That message had never been shared. It had been sent 2 days before he died, and it had been deleted, except it was still saved in my cloud, and the person who deleted it had access to my phone. Only one person, Matthew. The courthouse smelled like dust and nerves. I sat outside the hearing room with the flash drive, the notarized will, the handwritten letters, and the audio file still echoing in my headphones. My lawyer said we had more than enough to challenge the estate, and possibly to open a criminal investigation, but that didn't make it easier. I kept picturing my father alone in that house, realizing his son had turned against him, trying to protect me in the only ways he could. Scraps of paper, a hidden USB, whispered warnings. And I hadn't been there. Not when it counted. Matthew arrived 10 minutes late. Alone. No wife, no accountant. Just a dark blue suit and the same expression he wore at the will reading, confident, bored, superior. When he saw me, he didn't stop walking. Just nodded once and kept moving, like we were strangers crossing paths in a hotel lobby. Inside the room, it felt colder. My name was finally on the docket, a motion to unseal the estate case and submit new evidence. Matthew had filed for full control, based on the previous will. The one that left me nothing, but today, I wasn't silent. I watched as the judge scrolled through the notarized version. I listened as my lawyer explained the inconsistencies, the sudden switch of attorneys, the sealing of the case, the notarized document that clearly contradicted the submitted version. Then came the letters, and finally, the voicemail. There was a long pause when it ended. The judge looked at Matthew, then at me. Matthew didn't speak. The judge requested a recess outside. He finally turned to me. "You think this makes you the victim?" I don't think, I said. I know. He stepped closer, voice low. You were always the weak one. Always needed Dad's approval. Always thought love meant inheritance. It's pathetic. I didn't flinch. And you always thought power meant ownership. But it doesn't. Not of people. Not of legacies. He stared at me, like he was searching for some version of me that no longer existed. Then he said something that still sticks in my chest: you were supposed to let it go. But I didn't. The judge ruled to unseal the case. The new will was admitted. A forensic analyst confirmed the previous version had been altered digitally. The court ordered a full audit of the estate. And an investigation into the medical records was formally requested. Matthew didn't show up for the next hearing, haven't seen him since. Weeks later, I returned to the house. It was quiet. Too quiet. Dust had settled where life used to hum. I stood in front of the fireplace where I'd found the flash drive. Lit a small fire. Sat in his chair, and I listened to the video one last time. If Matthew lies, he had, but not just to me. To everyone, he took our father's trust. His fears. His love. And weaponized them. I shared the full story. Online. In court. With family friends who had wondered why I was causing a fuss. I showed them the letters. The receipts. The video. I didn't want revenge, I wanted the truth to breathe again. Some believed me instantly, others didn't want to believe it at all, but none of them could say I hadn't fought. Now, when people talk about my father, they mention more than his estate. They talk about his integrity. His doubts. His voice. Because I made sure it was heard. As for Matthew, he vanished from our lives, but sometimes, I wonder if he ever truly saw me. Or if, in his mind, I'll always just be the dramatic little sibling who wouldn't let go. Let them say that, if they must, because this time, the truth wasn't buried. It was resurrected, and it spoke louder than betrayal ever could.